Um, I was like trying to figure out between a handful of them and like what really helped define my identity. I was like struggling with what do we mean by identity, and the example I settled on was when I was working outdoor education. There was a day that I had a class that I really didn't want to teach, and my co-teacher really didn't want to teach it, and we kind of had the choice of which one of us was going to teach it. And like if I got to choose, like I didn't want to teach that canoeing class because it was a rough day and everything was just like looking terrible, and it just like seemed like not a thing that I wanted to do. And at a certain point, like my co-teacher was just expressing the same feelings that I was feeling. And in that moment, I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll just be the person that this other person can rely on. And I just did it. I like didn't think twice about it. And I just kind of like jumped up and did it. And it was hard, but it ended up being fine. And the thing that I take from that, the part of my identity, is that I really want to be someone that other people can rely on. And so like when it comes to my pain versus somebody else's pain, like my pain doesn't matter as much to me. Like my struggle is less hard than seeing somebody else struggle. So I always want to make life easier for other people. And I don't know if that like, I think that comes from like a values thing, is I don't value my own emotions as much as I value other people's emotions. But it ends up looking like I'm a pretty reliable person, and if somebody needs help, like they can come to me for help because I'm going to help them. So it like presents as pretty positive, but deep down I think it's less positive.
Yeah. I don't know, this is sort of a funny, it's interesting to think about situations in our lives critically. Like I feel, I don't know, like the first thing that comes into mind is I can think about multiple times when something doesn't go has gone as planned. And I feel like the reaction in my body is usually like an immediate reactionary response, which is to get like worked up or like stressed. And then eventually I'll like cycle through and just be okay with it. Like I'll never, I feel like it doesn't ever like ruin everything. Like I understand that not everything goes as planned. So the event that comes into mind was this winter when I was on a trip, traveling. I was driving on a road trip out west, and I had somebody who I was a new friend come meet me. And this was a romantic interest, and everything crashed and burned very quickly. And I think I immediately reacted by getting really angry and frustrated at this person for coming on this trip and not being who I wanted them to be, which is kind of unreasonable. But so my immediate reaction was like frustration, but then when all was said and done and he like left early, I think my reaction to that was to like go work out, exercise, get some sun, and then like move on. So I guess what that says about my identity is that I'm really reactionary, but rational at the end of the day. Which seems kind of contradictory, but that's just like, if I think about any moment where I've had a hang up like that, where the outcome is totally different than what I expect, that's usually what happens, is like these like two steps where like I immediately get really frustrated and angry, and then I'm like okay with it.
First thing that came to mind for me was my first year of college. I went to a college that I just thought would, for really no reason, everything would be amazing and I would love it and life would be perfect. And then I got there, I was like, oh God, this is just not going to be for me and not going to work. And I pretty quickly kind of just made the decision to buckle down, like work really hard, get out of there, do something, like transfer somewhere that really felt more aligned with me, how I ended up in Vermont. But I feel like that just kind of taught me that I'm not really willing to remain in a situation that I really like deep down know isn't the right thing for me, and isn't gonna, I don't know, serve me in the long term. So, and I can also be a pretty adaptable person, so sometimes that is in conflict. But I think at the end of the day, um, it was also on totally on me to change my situation, and kind of just realizing that I have agency in terms of my life and what it could look like. And so, and then that specific choice has led to pretty much all the good things that I've experienced since high school. So it worked out in the end. But I just also want to say this question is nice because it made me think about how, like, identity doesn't necessarily have to be like I don't know, like a job or a thing you do, or this activity defines you, but more just your character traits or personality traits that are, applicable across situations. No matter what changes, those are still going to be things that you go back to. So just kind of like characteristics and personality traits as an identity. I guess I always go to like social worker and friend, but there's more to it. So
about the question, just like for me, like I just thought immediately about the times I fucked up in the past, and how I reacted to it. And one of the times it reminded me of was when I had a high school party like about 2 weeks before college, and it got busted by the cops. And I reacted by taking my shirt off and pretending to be like Hercules, and like threatening the cops and saying, you can't come into my it was horrible. I have quit jobs as soon as I felt like sort of wronged, and I always sort of feel like the need to stand up for myself. And what I've learned through this process, and like it actually reminds me of, and this sounds super lame being from Burlington, Vermont, but like a Fish lyric I've heard recently, which is like 3 wrong turns can make a right. And I've learned recently that honestly, like I feel like it's taken those amount of times for me to fuck up in the past and react that way to like learn how to react in a positive way. And so that's something I would say that like my imperative behavior has taught me how to not be behavior. Like I've gotten my ass kicked, I've done these bad things, and now I'm 29 and like just want to be sort of friendly with myself, so that I can be friendly to other people. So that was my sort of condensed reflection, and I definitely can speak about it for a little bit.
My first reaction was, when did I fuck up in the past? And this was a big moment for me right after college. The plan was that I had signed a lease in New York City with a boyfriend that I'd been dating all throughout college. I was going to go to New Zealand for a quick month and then come back and start life in New York City. In reality, I went to New Zealand. I came back 5 months later, single, and moved back to Boston. And that was like the first time in my life that I'd started to really like think about my true internal identity. And it's very weird. I think like up until that point, everything had been external. Like I was part of a team. I was part of my friend group in college, and didn't have much solo time. I've always been extroverted. And I've been having, like during this coronavirus pandemic, I've been having flashbacks to the emotions that I had when I was in New Zealand. And I think it's because like truly taking the time to look internally right now. Because everyone's been saying like we go, go, go. And these emotions lately have been raw, and I think what it's been teaching me about myself is that I'm always able to just push things aside, or like I'll do something healthy. Like I'll go to yoga to deal with stress, but I'm not actually touching base with myself and like thinking about how I'm actually processing those emotions. And I think lately I've been trying to, like Elizabeth just said, realize that it's okay to have all of those feelings, and just let them come to you and try to react positively. But obviously that's not always possible.
The thing I thought of is like really specific and like kind of silly, but it was like when I was moving into college, I had gotten new sheets and I asked my mom to wash them, and she left them in the dryer. And so on the way to college, I'm like going to meet my new roommate. It's this whole thing. And she was like, oh, it's no big deal. Like you can just ask her for sheets. And I was like, I don't know this person. it's this like whole like identity moment of like, I don't know her, I'm gonna already seem needy, like my first impression is gonna be terrible, blah, 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 whatever. And it became this like huge blowout fight of like me at 18 freaking out about my first impression with my roommate. And I think like that moment I attribute to like a few like realizations in retrospect. That I think the first was, for me, like first impressions aren't as important as I think I used to think they were. Like now I realize if you're going to know people, being yourself at the beginning is kind of like table stakes, and like people will get to know you eventually. So it doesn't really matter what your first like hour impression of someone is. Like if you're going to get to know someone, they're going to know you anyway. So to kind of like relieve that stress. And then I think the second thing is like the whole concept of like, you can be right or you can be happy. Like you can put all this faith in other people and all these things going as planned and like having all of that built up on something specific, or you can just kind of let that go, which I think is my biggest thing I have to work on, is like getting off of the roller coaster when I'm at the top of it and saying like, oh, am I going to freak out about this thing, or am I going to just be like, it is what it is and it's out of my control and it happened. And I think like that was a key moment for me that I now start to think of, you know, like I can freak out about this thing not going as planned, or I can just be like, it happened and I can move forward without this freak out. So it was like I don't know, I feel like it was a crucial age and like a crucial moment. And like, it was so dramatic at the time, but I now realize it's silly and kind of like, it is the whole thing of like which one you feed. Like I could feed the anxiety and the drama and the nonsense, or I can just be like, this person's probably going to be my friend for the rest of my life, so it's probably fine. And I think just like learning to make the choice and acknowledge that it is a choice to like feed the drama or to feed the like, it is fine, just move on with it. So that was mine.
Well, let me see. I had so many thoughts. Honestly, I don't know where to begin, but I think for me in the last few years, I think I've kind of realized that identifying yourself to certain virtues or values that you have is sort of really important to understand where you're going in life. Just because for a long time, I kind of struggle. I'm gay, so and I'm Mexican Catholic, so being gay is sort of a little bit. It's very much of a taboo thing in my culture. So just being able to be comfortable with not necessarily that label, but with that way of living and having other people accept you, that's sort of hard to navigate. So being comfortable to a point of being able to identify yourself to maybe a label or certain virtues, and being able to hold those things accountable to yourself and to people that are around you is like just crucial to being who you are. So yeah, I mean, that's in a nutshell what I'm thinking so far. So yeah, I mean, I got married last year, so for a long time during the engagement, I think there was this huge I don't know, the situation was like me being okay with doing something that I didn't make me identify to something that didn't really matter, but it was more important to me to be like part of the human experience more so than just what people looked at it from the outside. So if that makes sense. So I think that was a big turning point in my life. So there's obviously certain people that won't be happy that you're part of a group or you associate yourself, you know, with the label. So, and that's fine, but to know who you are and kind of just be proud of what you represent, it really helps you kind of move forward without having to, you know, have all this baggage from, you know, prior experience.